What's going on, everybody, and welcome back to another video. So today is going to be a little bit different from any other videos you've seen on my channel before. And I want to open up like most dudes don't have the balls to do and talk about something that really all of us go through, but many of us spend our entire lives avoiding, and that's depression. More specifically, I want to talk about how depression stole 7 years of my life, my personal life. Every single day of that 7 years, I felt like was snatched away from me at the hands of depression. And I don't just want to make this a somber video where I just talk about all the troubling times in my life. I also want to share with you guys how I understand how you're feeling. I understand the weight of it. And I'm going to share all the ways that helped me personally get out of it. I've spent years since that point studying psychology, human behavior, the characteristics of these different things that trouble us, like anxiety, depression, and overall mental health. And because of the troubles I face in my own life, I've made it a mission and a purpose within my life to help as many people as I possibly can get out of the position that I was once in. And so this video is just another effort to help somebody, to make somebody feel seen, and to speak up for the people that might feel scared to talk about how they truly feel or what's truly going on in their mind, and just hopefully give them the confidence and inspire them to acknowledge their feelings, not run away from them, and not live a life of escapism and avoidance. So my story starts at 14 years old, right when I was coming into high school, kind of like that coming of age period in your life where you start to grow up a little bit more, you start to get exposed to a lot of different things that you were ignorant to before. And right around this time, I unfortunately lost my father. And my father had a disease called MS, which he had my entire conscious life. And my father was handicapped. He couldn't walk. And later on in my life, I realized that my father really lived through the lens of his disease. And that's something I want to touch on a little bit later. I remember I was on the phone with my father for one of the last times that I ever spoke to him in my life. And he told me that he probably wouldn't be around to see me graduate. And, of course I knew my dad had a disease, and I knew that it attacked his immune system, and I knew it made him a lot more vulnerable to other health problems. But it was the first time in my life that I truly realized that his life would probably come to an end a lot sooner than I anticipated. And I remember when he said that, I told him to not say that to me. I was like, Dad, please don't say that to me. Please don't manifest that into the world here, because it really cut me deep when I heard him say those words. And, to this day, I'm now 23 years old. It's been almost 10 years since my father has passed, and I still remember every bit of that moment and the sound of his voice when he said that to me. And it wasn't long after, probably 6 months or so, where my dad contracted a infection called MRSA, and then eventually contracted pneumonia as well. And because his immune system couldn't hold it due to his disease, it pretty much just took over his entire body. And so for around 2 weeks or so, I watched my dad basically deteriorate in front of me, and me and my brother sat around him every day and talked about all the good times with him and all the funny and great stories that we had about him, and kind of just reminisced on the impact that our father had in our lives, right? And this isn't something I ever thought I would talk about on camera, but this is what people need. People need that raw, vulnerable energy, and to know that just because you're willing to acknowledge your feelings and acknowledge your pain doesn't mean that you're a pussy. It doesn't mean that you're a weak man. It's just a matter if those emotions control you or not. And my father did eventually pass away about 2 weeks later. My mom came into my room at like 3 a.m. and told me that my father passed. And it didn't really hit me for a long time. It's just such a matter of shock. It's somebody that's always been in your life and always been there, always accessible to you. And no matter how hard you try, your mind and your body cannot process that as quick as you would think, right? Obviously, I was devastated. Obviously, I felt a lot of pain knowing that, one of my parents had passed. But at the same time, my body and my mind couldn't process it in that moment. It was just a feeling of pure shock, really. And so this was the start of depression for me, right? Because I never knew how to deal with that. And honestly, I never felt it before that point. I always thought I had an idea of what depression was before, and mostly it was just self-pity before, right? Just attaching to really small problems and just blowing them up to feel bad for myself. But this was the first time in my life that it really got real for me. And I really had to face something that really no 14-year-old should ever have to face. And so since I was going into high school, obviously in high school, it's the time where everybody starts drinking, everybody starts smoking, like experimenting with different things, right? And I had 2 older brothers, 2 years older, the oldest one 4 years older, so we're all 2 years apart, right? And obviously we all went to the same school, and I saw the things that them and their friends would get into. And at the time, you're kind of intrigued by all of this, and you're kind of intrigued by this risky, rebellious kind of lifestyle that you can walk into when you get into high school. Because the second you hit like 14 years old, you all of a sudden think you're a grown-ass man. So you just start thinking in a whole different way and thinking you have it all figured out and just trying to discover yourself, if that's the way to put it, right? And so, I saw what other people were doing, trying out the drinking and the smoking and stuff. And specifically in my small hometown in Connecticut, it's nothing but woods out there. There's nothing to do. So really the only things left to do are go to McDonald's, sit in the parking lot, go to the movies, and do bad stuff. And so since I was in pain and I didn't know how to deal with it whatsoever, I eventually dabbled into that. I started trying out different things. I started basically just trying a bunch of different things, kind of discovering, kind of learning myself, learning about life a little bit more. A lot of the stuff that I was never exposed to before, right? And my kryptonite became a dependency on smoking that Zaza. I'm gonna put it like that because I'm not trying to get striked on this video, but I started to become a very heavy smoker. All of my friends were heavy smokers. And so we kind of made it the activity that we all did together. And it ended up consuming us so much that really the only time that we would hang out with each other was to do that, was to smoke, was to, get as lifted as possible and then veg out on the couch for hours and hours just to try to feel something. I later found out in life, right? And at the time, I thought it was so fun and I thought it was great. And I thought, oh, I'm just a kid exploring life, I'm just a kid trying things out. But little did I know that that moment when I first started smoking would be something that consumed me for 7+ years of my life every single day from that point. And obviously, I lived in a small town, so losing a parent wasn't something that was common in my small town. I mean, any sort of tragedy or any unordinary situation really wasn't something that was typical in such a small group of people. So anytime anything like this happened, it would essentially spread through the whole town very quickly. Everybody knew what happened, and your business was out there before you could even internalize it, right? And so I took about 2 weeks off from school as like a grace period, my brothers and I, just to kind of sit there and try to understand what the hell just happened in our life and try to come to terms with the fact that we would never see our dad again. I remember going back to school and everybody would come up and say, "Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I understand, like, this is really hard for you. And like, if you need me, then I'm here for you." And I remember just hating that so much. I remember hating when people would come up and say, "Oh, I'm so sorry for you," because I mean, 90% of these people I didn't even know, or they just weren't really kind to me or ever tried to understand me. They just kind of saw through my flaws and judged me based off of that. But since this happened to me, now all of a sudden they're my best friend and they somehow know how I feel. And that was the part that really irritated me the most. When people would be like, "Oh, like, I know that this is really hard for you." And in the back of my head, I would say thank you and be like, "Oh, thanks, I appreciate it." But in the back of my head, I was like, you could never understand how this feels. And it kind of pisses me off that you're trying to basically act like you know what this feels like in any way, shape, or form. I mean, a lot of the people I grew up around really weren't exposed to any sort of adversity. They lived these American dream lifestyles, and I was one of those kids that was just exposed to a lot more darkness earlier on, and I outgrew my environment very quickly emotionally because of that, right? And so for them to come up to me and even try to attempt to make it seem like they have any understanding of what I felt like was really just a slap in the face, if you ask me. So I go back to school. I remember not feeling sadness or heaviness per se, but more of a numbness, right? I felt nothing. I felt nothing at all. I was in pure shock, a state of shock that would last for months and months. And really, I never really came to terms with all of this stuff until years later in my life, if I'm being honest, because I chose to ignore it and I chose to run away from it. I got into the substances, I got into the vaping and the smoking and the occasional drinking, really anything that would take my mind off of the fact that I was going through one of the hardest things I would ever go through at the age of 14, right? And so I was raised by women essentially anyways, because my dad was handicapped. He was very limited, right? Like, we would go see him on the weekends for quite a while, but after a while that kind of stopped because my dad couldn't really do anything. It turned more into taking care of him than it ever did taking care of us. And my dad was a great father, right? He would show up to all of our sporting events. He would show up to all of our important events, and my dad never showed us anything but love and compassion, right? And so I really commend him for that, and I really respect him for that. And it's a big part of, what made me who I am today. Not only his life, but also his death, right? So I spiraled into addiction, and I spiraled into this numb feeling and chasing it every day. I mean, I remember pretty much every day in high school, I would stay up until 3, 4 in the morning, just listening to music and watching YouTube and watching movies and playing video games, just really anything that would distract me from my real life and what was really going on. And I would literally come home most days and I would have this speaker on my desk and I would connect my phone to it and I would just play music for like 6 hours straight, staring at the wall until it was time to go to bed. And this was years and years of my life. And I mean, that could sound pretty weird to people, but I didn't know what else to do with myself. And it was the only way that I could really feel it. And I mean, of course, I was listening to like the saddest music you can imagine, like Lil Peep, XXXTentacion, you know, people like this, right? So this music was not only my distraction, but subconsciously pulling me deeper into the void, right? And so I would just get home, listen to music until my mom went to bed, sneak outside the house, smoke, and just chase that feeling for years and years. I mean, it came to a point about a year in where when I woke up in the morning, my only objective was to get high once again. My main objective, my main priority, my main goal was to keep inebriating myself, keep numbing myself, because from the second I woke up to the second I went to bed for 7 years, I felt completely uncomfortable in my skin. And the reason I go in so much depth with this is because I know you know how I feel, and that's why you clicked on this video. And I want to give you the full picture, not leave any parts out, trying to protect my ego or trying to protect any sort of insecurity I may have about sharing these things about myself. But at this point in my life, I don't care at all. If I could help you, if I can shed some light on your situation, I'm willing to be as vulnerable as possible. And I think objectively, that is what makes a man really a man. You know, being strong, but also willing to acknowledge what's real in life. And a lot of men silently suffer. A lot of men have this same level of depression, this same level of numbness, but they think any sense of opening up or any sense of trying to find meaning and healing within that is weak. From the age of 14 to the age of about 21 years old, the second I woke up, I was first of all disappointed that I woke up, because for many years of my life, I would lay my head down to go to bed and it was time to go to sleep, and sometimes I would pray to God not to wake up the next day. And I was so hollow and I was so deep in substance abuse and didn't feel supported by any of my friends for a very long time that I would literally lay there and pray to God that I didn't wake up the next day. And the distractions were never enough, right? We're in the age where everybody drinks their pain away, smokes their pain away, hookups their pain away, if you will. And as somebody that did that for 7 years, I need you to realize that that's never going to do anything for you. And deep down, you already know that, but you just cling to it because it's all that you know, and it's what's become comfortable to you. And if you're in that deep depression, you have to understand that that painful feeling that you have has become your emotional home. It has become the most familiar feeling to you. And so now you cling to that, and your mind is conditioned to pull you in any sort of environment, towards any sort of music, towards any type of movie that will give you that sad feeling once again. And a lot of people that are depressed, a lot like myself, became addicted to sadness. And when you hear me say that, you're like, why would anybody want to be sad? Why would that be desirable for anyone? But if a lot of you think about the state that you're in right now, I promise you that you have an addiction to pain. You have an addiction to your own sadness. And quite frankly, you like being sad. And that's why you keep listening to that sad music. That's why you only watch sad movies. That's why you only watch sad videos. Because you have become so familiar with pain that you literally chase after it every single day. And if you're not willing to realize that and take accountability for that, there's not many avenues you could go from there. That's one of the biggest pieces that you have to learn through this, is that you cannot attach that pain and that sadness to your identity. Because then you live every single day of your life through the lens of depression, through the lens of pain, through the lens of your mental struggles. And the more and more that you live through that lens,